So, welcome to the Career Chronicles. Today, I'm joined by Joyce. Joyce, how would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Joyce Santiago. I am a Drexel alumni, class of 2010, um, from LeBeau College of Business. And currently, I am a single mom with two girls, um, under 4 years old. Um, and so it's been busy, but as a profession, I am a director of FP&A and the Comcast advertising. Um, Division of Comcast. I am actually based in Towson, Maryland, while the rest of my team are in Philly, which was kind of a perk for me to move during
You
COVID.
know what? If it comes, get it, girl. You gotta take it where you can. So let's rewind back to when my sister got into college. The deal was for me, I get to go away to college wherever I wanted. Graduates high school, she gets into Drexel. My mom goes, "But she's your only sister. She'd be by herself. I mean, it would be nice if someone were to go look after her." And so I said, "I'll apply. If I get in and scholarship, fine. But if I don't get in, you cannot say anything. I get to go where I want." Mom says, "Deal." They gave me in and gave me a scholarship, which I lost within that first year. Right. So fast forward a couple months, helped my sister move in, and I believe you were on her floor for her dorms. And then over time realized, oh wait, she's in the business school. Cool. And I think that's like I want to say outside of like maybe one or two classes, I think that was the extent of it, right? But it's interesting to see that you a where like I mean a lot of people would have to like jump ship from like accounting, finance, all that. You stuck with it, right? So long-winded way of me asking, what were the factors or the variables that kind of led you to decide to go to Drexel?
um, I I'm a twin, so I grew up with my sister my whole life, and when it was time to select a college, we were both like, let's separate. And everyone was very surprised. But through visiting colleges, I knew all of my family are in the medical field, and I pretty much, like at 16, I was like, I'm not doing that.
Enter black sheep.
Yeah. So when I was trying to decide, honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I liked math. I knew I liked problem solving. And, as you fill out the form, accounting was one of the first ones. I'm like, sure, check the box. And, I always thought, at some point during my time at college, I'll figure out what I actually want to do. And I think the one thing that Drexel offered was, the awesome co-op program where it really would give you a chance to get real life experience of, what you signed up for and be able to say, is this for me? This is not for me. So, and also the network and exposure. So knowing that, I didn't have family in the business field or in Philadelphia, um, that's what really attracted me to Drexel. And it's far enough from home, but like close enough because it's like an hour and a half from Baltimore.
And I guess it is like regional, right? Because so where I grew up, Drexel at the time really wasn't a known school, right? I mean, for context, I grew up in New York, so for us, it's usually like the CUNY schools like SUNY Buffalo, Stony Brook, Binghamton, and so on and so forth. And then you have like your Ivy Leagues, and then like your big schools, right? Do you happen to remember like how you stumbled into like at least hearing the Drexel name?
I think it was, when you're a junior, senior, all the colleges you've never heard of just start to bombard your mailbox.
Fair enough.
And then, yeah, I think it was, all the mailings and then actually doing research at that time. My sister and I were the first like ones to go to college out of my siblings in the US. So we really had to navigate this whole thing by ourselves. Like my parents really wanted us to like kind of take charge of, where we go in our future from that standpoint.
How was that? How was that in terms of um your like your mental? emotional, physical, all that jazz. Like, did that put additional stress, do you think, or did it help? What was that like for you?
I think it's funny that you bring that up because there's a lot of things that that's surfacing now in terms of like I don't know, maybe coming from an Asian, I'm an immigrant, right? Like, not first generation. So when we came to the US, my parents worked, and it was a lot of like me and my sister, my brother figuring out like life. So at that point, it was stressful or in terms of like, oh, how do I read through this loan document like for applying for student loans? My dad helped out a lot, but he really wanted us to kind of take charge. Hey, this is it, going to school doesn't just mean showing up, right? There's all these other things, and there's responsibilities that you're gonna be carrying for 15, 20 years. Um, so in that way, I'm like, okay, I'm glad that that happened because I've met a lot of people who, kind of had their hand held, but at the same time, I'm like, oh, I wish I had more help during that time.
You know, Formidable years, right? And we'll get into like how the outcome has turned out, right? Because I'm sure some people appreciate, some people don't, and there's a whole gamut in between. But I guess for me, I got to that point of when I had this discussion with my wife. One of the things that we discussed was like, hey, like I get that our instinct is going to say like our version of love is always going to be like, hey, let's protect them from the world. But I'm like, I want to fight that instinct and be like, hey, I'd rather be the parent that prepares them to deal with whatever the world brings them. And sometimes that's going to be, unfortunately, as uncomfortable as a parent, I'm realizing how deep that feeling hits. Of like, sometimes we're gonna have to say, look, well, if things like shatter, we'll be there, right? But I'm gonna let you break some things on your own, right? So it looks like your parents kind of take that approach with you.
Yeah, for sure. There were probably not as much repercussions, like not a lot of yelling, a lot of silent disappointment. Which at the same time, I'm like, we should have just talked about it.
That's kind of new. I mean, and again, this is just the way I grew up, right? I grew up around a lot of Filipino families, and it usually isn't that quiet. Usually, it's like they'll let you know that you were slipping, and then all the aunties know, and then the aunties will give you grief, and it's like, oh Jesus, it's like Koreans are not much different, are they?
Oh, I'm sure everybody knew about it. But I think my parents also like to show a perfect
Mhm,
like family.
mhm,
So they have their people that they go
mhm.
to. But it's also like, all right, like that you did something wrong.
Right. You know.
You know. We don't have to like drill this in.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So, so you decide that first and foremost you're going to split with your sister. I'm assuming part of that, the way I'm hearing that is, I think it's like the typical twin life syndrome where like you kind of always attached at the hip, forcibly or not, and so now you guys are like, hey, you go that way, I'll go this way, we'll figure it out, and good luck, right? So how was that? How was that adjustment?
It was easier than I thought it would be. I think high school, like, kind of, we were able to really start to find ourselves and found that, there are a lot of things that we are similar and have similar likes, dislikes, but there there were things that like I leaned into like sports, whereas she's like, I'm not doing that. That's not for me. So I think we were both kind of like, hey, let's figure out life without each other. And it was great to like go to a new school and have a friend with you already. Like that was awesome. But going outside of my box and just really figure out who am I without her. Um, and that it was hard, but I think like, I visited her college a lot. She came up a couple times as well at Drexel. Um, and we were always on the phone together. This was before Skype or FaceTime.
Where technology was real.
So, like, Facebook, things like that, where everybody, like, that's how we were all connected. So it was a lot easier. But it did feel like, I had to, like, we went home a lot, like family is a big thing for us. So we went to on weekends we'd spend a lot of time at home and spend time with family and things like that. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I spent too much time with family that I didn't get to like build those like, friendships that last, years and years and years from college. But I think that's just kind of like life, right? Like you just realize you do change and yeah.
Were there any particularly memorable lessons learned or things that you found out about yourself in that? Let's call it the first 2 years.
Yeah, I think the first 2 years, like before, after college or after college, it was like I had I graduated after 4 years from Drexel, so before or I opted to drop my last co-op. So a lot of my friends were still on their last years during my first year of working, and there were just friends who I started to get busy with work, and I started to make that priority, and then I started to kind of see, okay, like this friend, our values don't really align, and maybe I'm reaching out more than she is, and then so like I would kind of be like, okay, my energy is probably worth spending on the people who are actually investing in me as well.
It's a hard pill to swallow for some people, right? And I mean, to be fair, I don't know how you've grown since, right? But I do see where some people will take that and essentially shut out a lot of people. I don't get the sense of that from you. Granted, it's been what 15 years at this point, uh, and I reached out to you cold, so like, hey, like we're doing this thing, and you've been more than gracious, and you just said, hey, yeah, I'm down, whatever it is, I'm in. And so, well, first and foremost, thank you for that. That does require a leap of faith that most people would absolutely not say okay to. um,
Well, thank you for thinking of me. So,
it's weird. I don't. And there are some people that I bump into life, and for whatever reason, I can't really shake them. And like would assume that a lot of times those are like, oh, these are my best friends for like the 30 years. Da, 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 da. I randomly get these things where like I randomly think of people and not in any like particular like way. It's just like, oh, like it's kind of like, oh, like I remember that person. I'm like, I wonder if they're doing okay. And it's a weird thing that I have that just pops in. And
that's really nice.
but sometimes it's like it's frustrating because like I do have a curious brain, and so sometimes it's like I do want to check in, but then obviously in this society nowadays, it's like, oh, how you doing? And it's like I don't, yeah, like yeah. It turns into that, or like, and I get, I mean, early in my younger years, when I do that, sometimes, of course, I would say like your early to mid 20s, right? So usually because I'm a dude, it's like, bro, I'm not interested. I got a boyfriend. I'm like, that is definitely not the right route I was going, but okay, like, congratulations, So it's just for some reason, I think, and for you, I think it's because one of my earliest memories when I went to Drexel was again like having my sister settle down. I think you were one of the first faces that like I remember, like, oh, like okay, it's like there's maybe 2 or 3 faces from that first week that I recall, and for some reason it was like you were among one of them, and it's just one of those like call it like Papa Bear instincts. I'm like, oh, I wonder if they're okay. Like, I hope they're doing well. Uh, I think there is. I applaud you for that portion of growth, right? Because people will really lean into that, like always start to chase, like, oh no, love me more, care for me, da, 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 da. Like I think you're like, I think yeah, you know what? I need to lean into what's productive. Like I think that's not always easy, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not. And I would say that maybe I can't say that like I put my energy in the right things either, right? Like I focus on work, and I made a ton of really good friendships there. I my first job was in public accounting, so like you're going through these like long hours with these people that you actually like or dislike, but you find your people there. And I have two of my best friends are from that job. Um, and but at the same time, like I also focus on my relationship with my ex-husband at that time, and maybe I focused too much on work, and that was my escape from that relationship that I should have probably addressed sooner than later. But life teaches us these lessons in time.
That is interesting. I would say And some of my close relationship are actually well, some, like the closest. Luckily for me, I have some from friendship. But honestly, there's yeah, I agree. Like there's some of the people that contact the most would be like previous coworkers. Thankfully, like that's your squad. And then I just realized something. You sign up at Drexel, accounting major, and figured, hey, worst comes to worst, I'll change major, and you never did. What is that? What is that?
So I was, my first co-op was in public accounting, and I did a tax co-op. And it's one of those from like January to spring. So like in the heart, in the thick of it, a tax season. And I was like, all right, I might as well just do the most mundane thing. To like when we think of accountants, that's what they do, right? And the people there were amazing. Like it was at this medium-sized company called Asher and Company, and they've been bought by BDO or merged with BDO back in, I don't know, 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But it really wasn't the work, it was the people. And like I didn't stay with tax accounting.
Clearly.
Um, and I was like, okay, yeah, I could do this. And I grew my network there, um, and actually ended up getting a job there off out of college in 2008 in their audit department. So that's the that's the step that I took there, and I thought, again, that was like insane hours. I got to a point, like I think I was like 3.5 years in, where I was leaving work very early, getting home, eating dinner, working until however late, and like waking up, working. Like it was just like all year long too. Yeah.
How'd you manage that? Because that is one thing where I get a lot of either whether from parents or people who are going into college or just starting out, and they usually ask like among other things like, hey, what's the work like? How's work life like? What is like is it worth it? For me, it's another one that I was commonly hear. Like how would you describe your life in those years?
Um, I was happy that I worked with enjoyable people in that life, and they got us through. But I think it's like you also get this sense of I like teamwork. Like that motivates me a lot. And just like the relief you feel when you all get together, just like, all right, we're doing this, like we're gonna get it done. And at the end, it's like, work hard, play hard type thing is the public accounting way, if you know what I mean.
Yep. I mean, I started off in audit out of college.
Hmm.
I mean, there are a lot of things to I prefer to bury, but the I mean, you're talking about like sometimes you might be working 80 hours a week, but the other say you might have like another 40 hours a week of like we're just going out and we're gonna as a team we're going out and we're gonna like unwind. I'm like I look back now, I'm like I don't know how we were psychopaths because some of these people are not like early 20s. Some of these people were like in hindsight, I'm like these dudes were like in their 30s and 40s and they're throwing down like this. I'm like Jesus Christ. But I mean, there was a bond that forms, right? There's like we could hate the clients, we could hate the work, we could hate whatever, but at the end of the day, we're sitting there like, you know what? There are expletives and all that thrown out, but like, cheers, like, well done.
Yeah. 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 I can't say it's healthy, but we got through it. It's definitely not, it wasn't, I realized I was like, all right, that like I can't make this last. And before 3.5 years in, I was like, let me see if I could do this, but let me see something new. And it was one of those things where like a recruiter reaches out to you. So someone from Comcast reached out to me, and I was like, all right, let me see like the other side of this. Um, and that's my story at Comcast. I've been there for 11 years. So
But there's okay. So what were the? Well, I'm gonna start picking apart, right? So outside of the feasibility in terms of or longevity of the career of I'm gonna call it burnout, right? Because
yeah, oh, for sure.
it is a very intensive life to live, and there's a reason why. And I think this feeds into one of the reasons why there's that trope of like accountants are boring, miserable people. I would still argue depends on who you are, right? Because me and Joyce here, we're a good time. We're a good time, right? But what was this? was there anything else that kind of led you to say like, I need to leave, like I need this job, like this is the job I'm taking?
I think for me, it was always, I realized that, okay, I'm on the same client every year. It's the same exact like thing. I could do this in a new client, but it wasn't challenging enough in a way. Like, yes, there's so much work that it was challenging because you had to do it in like such a constrained amount of time. But in terms of learnings, I was like, I'm ready for more. I'm ready to actually get to know a business. I'm ready to get to know, a specific industry. And that's kind of what led me to search outside.
So you went through, looks like the general accounting like steps, right? You went to general accounting, then you went to reporting. So you like kind of bump it up and for me, the way I argue with that is like you pump it up chains, right? You went from like the grunt level where everyone's like, oh, your typical, like, here's your pocket protector and like da da da. But then, so from audit to accounting, right? Uh, what, was there like a shift in, um, how you felt about your career or like felt about the work you're doing? Like, could you walk me through that phase?
I just felt like uh, public accounting was really like at that point draining me, and um, I was also trying to study for the CPA exam, which in itself, like, if you're working these crazy hours and your schedule has turned out, not just the winter time, but also spring and then also fall, like it's becomes a whole year essentially. Um, I just couldn't. I couldn't pass it. I couldn't put in the time. And it was the burnout of, do I still want to be a CPA versus like, and I couldn't move on essentially in the public accounting world if I didn't have that license. So, one, it was kind of like, all right, realization of like, am I more happy like getting this license, or am I just doing it to keep this job? And so I taking one of those pressure off was probably like, okay, let me see something else. I could always go back, right? If I really wanted to.
Now, how do you feel about the decision now?
Best decision ever.
Yeah. But so, I mean, at this point, you're almost like half a decade in with this career. Um, and you mentioned that you had like your family is predominantly medical, and for me, my experience here is like a lot of your Filipino families were like, hey, we're like nursing or like or you're getting into like as a doctor, whatever. But like if you're not one of those, like you kind of failed, right? Right? It's like so like how did the family take it at this point?
um, they were very proud of me for finally passing my CPA and getting my license. They still think that I should like know tax. Like, I still get tax questions to this day, and I'm like, that is not what I do. Yeah, and but I know my dad would sometimes throw out, "Don't you want to go back to school and be a lawyer?" And I was like, "No, are you kidding me?"
Dad, Mr. Santiago, no, 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 no.
But yeah, there's always, I don't know, like if other Asian family, like it's like, don't you want to do the next? And I'm like, I'm good.
You know what? It's like with Koreans, it's what is it? The sacha, right? So in when we have professions, right? Like doctor, lawyer, but it's like 의사, doctor, 변호사, lawyer, accountant, 회계사, right? Like it's so anything that ends with the sa,
Asa, uh-huh.
and they're like, I think God bless my mother. She actually didn't push me into. She's like, just do whatever, right? It makes sense. But then once I got it, she's like, hey, don't you want to get your MBA? Don't you want? I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm done. I'm so done. I'm so done. Right? As a caveat, I took my CPA exam, and when I finally passed, I definitely didn't pass the first time.
Oh no.
They're like, why don't you get your LSAT? I didn't realize what like real trauma was gonna. I realized that like growing up, there were a lot of traumas, right? Either in scare quotes or like in actuality. But I guess I never really internalized that, being your typical like Asian male growing up with whatever. But like the first time, I like almost like a PTSD thing was like, oh, why don't you study for the LSATs? I'm like, huh? I'm like, and I did it because I think at the time my brother wanted to try whatever. I, I would stare at these pages and I could not, for the life of me. And when I took the exam, it was like pages were like blurred out and missing. I'm like, this is an official exam, right? Like, what is going on? Like, yeah, you're gonna have to figure it out. I'm like, okay, I'm freaking done. Like, I was like, you know what? Never again. I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. So I parents, parents, parents. If your kids are on a career track, they're doing okay. Leave them alone, please, please. Oh my goodness. So
For sure.
so so I'm assuming so you moved into Comcast. Hopefully you have enough time for you to study somewhat. I don't know if it's could be much different than public, right? Because some corporate jobs.
Different, yeah. Especially in the general accounting space, right? Like you're entering journal entries, you have month-end close. Like it's pretty basic accounting. But it was what I needed at the time so I can focus on my exam. And I passed within before I hit my 1 year there. Yeah, yeah.
Dude, that's okay. So for those that who don't understand that, usually you have what is it like 18 months to pass like a cycle.
For something, yeah.
So you could technically you could try as many times as you can, but honestly, there's gaps, right? So there's only so many times you can take it. But if you cycle once you pass that 18th month mark, whatever, like you have to retake exams, even if you pass them. This is where it gets expensive, and it gets like just there are a lot of very unsafe like feelings that come with this. Okay, so to be able to get it done with before with I'm gonna argue within the year, right? Because I'm honestly speaking, if you're working in public accounting, the hours that you're actually putting into studying is probably not that much, right? So call it within a year, you banged it out, and that is an impressive feat. So congratulations, well done.
Thank you. Thank you.
So you finished in the year one, and then looks like you did a little bit more, and then you got into like the reporting end of things. Is there a particular reason?
So, when I joined Comcast, it was 6 months into me joining, they announced that they were going to acquire Time Warner Communications. So, because I was like, I need more from my work because I came from public into this like entering journal entries. And so it's like, I need more. So they put me in that project. And then when all of that came to, hey, the FCC is never going to approve this, we and I was like probably one of the few people who was excited about it because I had been working on that that project. I was like, all right, like now I know I can't go back to what I was doing. And for some reason, just like, the network of Comcast is so like vast. Like somebody had already heard of my name and was like, we have this opening, you should apply for it. And I was like, all right, reporting team. And there's a lot more exposure to senior leadership in that role. And it was my first people leadership role into a new team for me, also learning something new, um, which was definitely a challenge. I don't like if you ever like one of my biggest challenge in my professional life to this day is just finding that your management style and going from doer to like this people leader, right? Like from a contributor to this people to a people leader, um, because like you're like talk about time management, right? Talk about um, communication styles. It's always going to be different depending who you're working with, and like getting thrown or get coming into a new team and they've already had this bond and they were very skeptical to somebody coming new in who's new. And at that time, I think they ended up letting somebody go. And they're like, well, why did she get it and not this person? So I really had to kind of like, I had some difficult conversations with folks then, and I was like, hey, it's me. Like, that's all you got now, right? Like, you either work with me or you don't, but we got to figure out how to get stuff done together. Um, so that was scary. Like,
And what was your mindset there, right? Because some people just grit into teeth and like pardon the French, but bitch and moan, or right?
yeah, yeah. I'm not a bitch and moan person. Um, sometimes when I find myself that I'm doing it and it's constant, I like hear the record in my head and I'm like, oh God, I need to do something about this, right? And I'm like, I can't just like complain because like no one else is fixing this for me. I really have to take a hold of this. And luckily, I had great leaders in my team then, and I still look to them like they're like are my best coaches, like mentors. Um, and they were like, "Hey, you, I can help you take care of this, but I think you're capable of that." Like, and you're going to have many more of these difficult conversations with other people in your career. Um, yeah, I remember, specifically remember going to the court, like grabbing this person. And I'm like, hey, let's go talk to this corner of the office and like having this conversation. And from then on, I was like, all right, yeah, she means business.
And is there a particular approach that, well, back then, and does it differ now in how you approach these type of situations?
Yeah, back then, I think like for me, I mean, I'm a like just general people pleaser in general. So like it took me probably longer back then to actually say or like address these situations. Whereas now it's like, hey, time to get serious type thing. And I'm not so much concerned if like everybody likes me. Some people like, it's work, right? But you have to be respectful with people, and it's harder, especially in your earlier in your career, to not take things personally. And I had such a trouble, you know, getting feedback and not, um, yeah, not, yeah, just continuing to have this narrative in my head of like, oh, I suck, like I need to get better, I need to do more work. But it's not really that. It's more, you take it and try to learn from it and continue to seek that feedback, and not just internalize.
I think that's interesting. And at this point, your trajectory is actually pretty. By some measures, people are gonna say like that's pretty fast, right? And is there a key to how you approach things, the way you look at things, or just the things that you've done? Like, how is it that you managed to be successful in your career in the way that you have? Because I think it speaks. I think it's more than accomplishments. I want to focus on the person you've become because I think that is important. I think that is what drives this.
Yeah. Um, I'm gonna go a little like personal in this space because I've been doing a lot of work for myself lately, through therapy. Um, and to be honest, before I had kids, I loved work. I was very passionate in whatever it is I was doing. I would really put my heart into it, and that was my number one priority. And I mentioned this earlier, like I probably used it as an escape way too many times from, whatever was going on in my personal life, um, to make it seem like, everything's okay. So in that way, I was very driven. I'm a very ambitious person. Whenever I felt like, oh, I'm doing the same thing over and over. I need something else. Like I'm like every year, every quarter or whatever, like as you're doing your performance reviews or your self-evaluation, like um I always think through like, okay, where do I want to be in 6 months, in a year? Where do I see myself? Like what exposure do other people have that I haven't gotten and I want to get? So I have those conversations with, my manager and you know, other people, mentors, peers. Um, and that's kind of how I moved up through, in a Comcast. Um, and you would say it's fast. To me, it's definitely slowed down. Um, and that's okay too. I think for me, because since I had kids, my priorities shifted, and that was like a huge awakening for me coming back from maternity leave for the first time. I was very, very tough on myself. Because I was used to, okay, like, just getting going and getting my team like, working on however many projects, um, and I couldn't even do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not meaning this, or like, I'm not involved in this, I'm not involved in this. And I saw that as kind of like a failure. And then I had a conversation with my boss at the time, still my boss now. And I was like, I feel like I'm just not doing well. And he's like, um, is it because of what I like your expectations of what you should be doing? And he was like, I know that this is going to be a tough transition, and I like want to give you the time to kind of ease in back to work. And he's like, I haven't given you much pressure on, what to get involved with. And really you have to tell me like what you're ready for. And so I was like, oh yeah, you haven't been pushing me on this. It's me, like it's all internal. Um, yeah.
And so that's gonna be hard, right? Because I think it's been, people mention it, but it's really hard to understand what that is until you are a mother yourself. I think, right? There's a societal. I mean, there are people who like cry about it, right? Of like, oh, you don't know how hard it is for women. It is hard. It is absolutely. And I think for me, it's more of in terms of it's really defining the why, right? And I see with my wife. At this point, we have two children, but I've seen it, with close coworkers, right? And what are some of the concerns, fears, and like paranoid, almost schizophrenic, you know, narratives that run through your mind, before, during, after? Like, is that something that you want to get into, or would you rather?
Like it through like while working or just in general raising kids.
Take it wherever you want, right? Because at this point, I've heard it like in intimate detail throughout, but I think it's different for different folks.
Yeah. Um, I mean, intrusive thought of the day, every day, um, would probably be, am I, making the right decisions for my kids? So like I'm moving out of my sister's house finally after 2 years, in 2 weeks, and I have to move them to a different daycare. And, they're already going through so much, like, having to go to their dad's and go to my house. Um, so to me, growing up in a, one in one family, one home, um, everything that I do, I'm constantly like, is this the right decision for my kids? So that's like probably the most like the biggest internal pressure. And I think, I think now that I'm raising kids, it's like, oh yeah, my parents didn't know anything either.
That's actually
Why did I put that like them in a pedestal? Like,
the same reason why kids look at you as the all knowing, right? And I do see there's a trend here, and what I haven't been able to nail down is I do sense that you have like this bit of like imposter syndrome that kind of like bubbles up in your brain. Clearly, you're driven, and like you actually actively go seek, whether it's mentors or just figure out the next steps to like, vine swing to the next thing. But is it that you're running towards something, or are you running from something, generally speaking?
I'm more secure now of where I am in life, um, versus back then with the whole like moving. Um, it was more so, I think I was running away from something in terms of like, oh, things are starting to get easy at work, then I have to actually deal with what the heck is going on at home. So then I'm like, let me distract myself with whatever is new and hard, and I have to put all the time in it, so I can make this excuse to not deal with, oh, I have a partner who, would gaslight me when we have fights, and everything just turns into like this bomb. And yeah,
It's growth.
yeah.
And look, this is where I think this is why I like having these conversations, right? Because obviously, those who are just graduating or just like freshly, they think they have a lot of things figured out, or vice versa, they're like, "Oh, I have zero idea what life is going to look like." But outside of like your Google food, like, hey, like this is your career trajectory. This is what you do. This is how you get a new job. This is how you have to like. I think, especially everyone has similar struggles, right? You have job, you have promotions, you have paying bills, but there are nuances here, right? I think there are some contextual things of like, and that's not to say the other groups don't have it, but like typical Asian cultural backgrounded folks, they have some things that we still are.
That should be the last one of the session.
Yeah. But like this is things that we work through, right? And again, these are not necessarily specifically unique to the Asian community, for instance, right? But these are things that do matter, and I think as in Asian cultures, we do have that big bro, big sis kind of culture, like whether you're blood related or not. And so this is where this is where I like to kind of shine a light on. It's more than your job, right? Your job is important, right? Like or rather, what you do to find purpose is important. I think, right? It could be a job, it could be something else, right? Some people would literally work the job so they could work on passion projects, or some people have the great fortune of like being able to like your passion is your job, right? Arguably, more times than not, I'm at my point of career where I can readily admit that accounting and finance is not a passion for me. It's not. Well, like the things I could do with it are absolutely amazing, but the actual like getting in the weeds of like doing accounting entries is not my idea of like a good time, right? Um, but is there, now that you are where you are there kind of what if you were to capstone it with maybe a couple talking points or words of wisdoms? Do you have something that you would kind of tell your younger self, or someone coming up?
Yeah. For my younger self, I would tell her to listen to her what you're feeling, and it's valid, and no one needs to validate that except for you. Um, um, and then for, the graduating folks or people, all the college folks who might be listening, stay as you go into your co-op or starting off a career, stay curious, right? Um, you might feel like you know everything right now, or you don't, but stay curious and really find where you belong in that way. Ask the questions, right? Um, just because they've been doing it a long time doesn't mean it's the right way to do
Fair
it,
enough.
or it makes sense.
And for someone who's had reports many times over at this point, is there any words of wisdom that you would have for someone who's trying to level up in their career?
I think just, continue to advocate for yourself, know your worth, um, and make sure you're having those conversations openly. No one's going to do this for you. You can't continue to, you can't think that, oh yeah, my boss knows that I'm doing a great job, so I'm going to get that promotion. Have that open conversation and say, I want to be promoted by X amount of time. Here's how I think I can do it. Let me know if you agree with that. Because I think that shows a lot of, like I love it when people come to me like that and I'm like, yes, a plan, let's do it.
And I'm gonna caveat that with what the typical approach that I've heard, which is always like a facepalm moment of like, I've been here for 3 years, I've done my job, and I think
Yeah.
I think I deserve that senior role now. Okay, no, no.
Hmm.
Well, John got it. That's John. What have
Yeah.
you done to go over? Like, what are you talking about here? Like, what? And
Yeah.
because we're short on time, I do want to delve into that at some point, if you will allow me.
For sure. Yeah.
But if and people would like to reach out or anything like that, is there somewhere that they could reach out to you or connect?
Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. Um, find me as Joyce Santiago in Towson. Um, I think there's a couple Joyce Santiago. I am not a realtor. I think there is one that's a realtor.
Fair enough.
But yeah, catch me there.
And last question: if you had to call someone out and for me to go chase down and be like, hey, you need to do this interview? Is there a person you would like to recommend?
Um, let's see. I actually have a Drexel alumni person in my group. He's had a couple, um, you know, he's a little bit more junior than I am, but I think he would be a good person to have for this. His name is Frankie Chen. Chan.
Ricky Chan. Well, if you get a random message from a creeper on LinkedIn or so on and so forth, blame Joyce.
I'm gonna go ping him right now.
Just like that's all.
Heads up, someone might be reaching out.
So Joyce, I know that we have to get on with our day. As parents, I know we're always like the early bird people, but again, you've been really gracious with your time and your wisdoms, and I do want to thank you personally, and on behalf of everyone else who is going to watch. Um, so, with any last words?
Thank you again for thinking of me, and good luck out there to everybody listening, like trying to get a job right now. Crazy, crazy times.
I agree with that one. So, if anyone else who has any questions or anything that you want to bounce off, feel free to reach out. Thank you for the time. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.
Bye.